This is the Popular Front podcast with me, Jake Hanrahan. We're focused on the niche details of modern warfare and underreported conflict all across the world. Popular Front is completely independent. Today we're speaking to journalist and co-founder of 404 Media, Joseph Cox. He's going to be talking to us about a very weird situation where an Iranian hitman tried to contract Hells Angels in Canada to kill Iranian dissidents in the US. Very interesting, weird network of people. Joseph is going to tell us all about it. If you like what we're doing here at Popular Front, support us so we can keep growing independently. Patreon.com/popularfront. Today we're going to be speaking about, honestly, a story that it sounds like the sort of thing that like Ben Shapiro would make like a shit movie about, but it's real. Flipping hell, like Iran hired assassins, murder plots, Encro chat, all of this mad stuff. Hells Angels, like, tell us, what is this? What is going on?
Yeah, I mean, it's even hard to articulate because it's so crazy, but I will try to put it in one sentence. And it is essentially that an infamous drug trafficker, supported by the Iranian state, hired a Hells Angel member to organize a murder of at least one Iranian defector on US soil. And this was all planned across an encrypted phone platform called Sky. You mentioned EncroChat, that's like another similar one. They're all sorts in the same ballpark, and I'm sure we'll get to the phones, but that is the story sort of in a nutshell, like the top line.
Right, and this is a Canadian thing as well, right?
Yes, the Hells Angels member was a Canadian national, and also was also the other guy he allegedly hired. Those two people, like, look, there's a lot of characters here, and I don't think your listeners need to necessarily like remember all their names, but more their roles. But the Hells Angel member, one of the Canadians you mentioned, his name is Damien Patrick John Ryan. According to the court records, he hires a guy called Adam Richard Pearson. The Iranian drug trafficker, who is over in Iran, so I really doubt sort of the likelihood of him getting caught at this point. That is Naji Zindashti. And there is also an unnamed co-conspirator one who is also in Iran, according to the court records.
Right, and they were planning to kill two people in the US, right? Why? What? Who is it they wanted to kill? And how did this weird bunch of people come to be on the same mission?
Yeah, so it's a little bit unclear on who exactly the target was, but what we do know is that, as I said, at least one was an Iranian defector. That's the word that the court records use. I saw some New York Times reporting which referred to it to this person as a refugee as well. I think there definitely needs to be more reporting around that specifically. I think that would be very illuminating, while obviously, you know, hopefully not putting the victim in any harm's way. But to sort of answer the other part of your question, I guess I'll take a step back and just run through the timeline. So, yeah, so the way that they meet is, well, maybe not meet, but at least how this operation starts in around December 2020, so several years ago at this point. Zindashti reaches out to Ryan, the Hells Angel member, and they're talking about, quote, jobs, equipment, and how to make money. That's all pretty vague, you know, like that could be anything, but eventually it becomes very clear that they are talking about a hit. They're talking about an assassination. And the Hells Angel member says stuff like, quote, East Coast is very hard for me. West, I can do more and have more options, end quote. Ryan then messages this other person I mentioned, Pearson, who's sort of the Canadian foot soldier, I guess. And he was tasked with, well, if the Iranians are going to outsource it to the Hells Angel member, Pearson, well, the Hells Angels then is contacting this guy. There's like a very weird relay race or supply chain here of like, well, who's actually going to do the hit? Pearson says that he knows some trusted people who could do it, and, you know, quote, shooting is probably easiest thing for them, and that he might charge more than $100,000 for the hit. And eventually, all the pretense is dropped basically from the conversation. No longer are they talking about jobs and equipment and making some money. There are quotes in there like, "We gotta erase his head from his torso," and talking about just super explicitly like what is going to be like. They need to make an example of this person, apparently at the direction of these Iranian handlers. And eventually they agree on a price of $350,000 for the hit and $20,000 of expenses. And I'll just say that I've covered the encrypted phone industry for nearly 10 years now, and I'm sure we'll get more into the phones in a second. But through that, I've read, I don't know, tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of encrypted messages over that time. And $300,000 for a hit is, to be quite morbid and frank with you, crazy expensive.
Yeah, I was thinking exactly the same. I was like, 300,000. Like, people get killed for like $2,000, $5,000. Like, okay, it's a bigger case, but 300 grand.
Yes, and I think there's a couple of things to that. As you say, like, it's a lot cheaper. You use the figures 2-3 grand. I've seen sort of similar. A concrete one I've seen is something like 20K for somebody who owed, I think, 2 million or something. So you're getting into the single digit percentiles of what money is owed to actually carry out the hit. Like, it's very cheap, basically. And it's funny the guy brought up West Coast, because that's something I hear as well, is that West Coast can be easier for that sort of thing. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure why the price was so high, but I would guess it's probably, well, in part because we're dealing with an infamous Iranian drug trafficker connected to the state, who maybe 350K for him is nothing, or 350K is nothing for the Iranian state. That, and it is on US soil, to be fair. So yes, maybe, well, it is a bit harder, I guess, for some criminal elements, but still a crazy amount of money.
Right, and how sure are we that this was all completely legit? I know, obviously, in the past, the FBI and various other ABC agencies will like coax people into madness. For example, we covered a case where the FBI basically recruited an autistic boy into what he thought was ISIS and then arrested him for it. How sure are we that this is like fully legit, like this is actually the proper deal?
Right, yeah, and I know exactly the cases you're referring to, and like I think The Intercept has done really good reporting on that, and like, yeah, almost like these entirely fabricated cases out of whole cloth, right? I can only go on what's in the court records, but I would say that my read is that it doesn't feel like that for a couple of reasons. First, there's no mental health issues or other conditions mentioned, at least explicitly. That and Ryan, his name, the Hell's Angel member, they describe him as a, quote, fully patched member. And maybe not everybody's familiar with how biker gangs work, but that's quite hard. Like, you have to like do a fair bit to become a fully patched member. Now, look, maybe the court records are misrepresenting, and maybe he's just a guy who loves bikers and is pretending to be that. But if the court records are accurate, this is a fully fledged member who is doing the sorts of things that you might expect from a criminal enterprise. That, and I would say that there's no mention of a cooperating witness or other sort of informant in there. There is just all of these Sky encrypted messages, or rather ones that should be encrypted, but somehow they're in this court document.
Right, well, let's talk about the encrypted phones. At the start, I said EncroChat, but it wasn't that. It was something similar. Maybe for anyone that doesn't know, what is like encrypted phones, the whole world of that? I know you lot have done really good work covering that, but I think a lot of people are really unaware of it still.
Yeah, totally. So if you're a normal privacy preserving person, maybe you download Signal, maybe you would use Telegram for certain things, maybe you go to Freema. Like I could list off this like infinite array of apps, right, that so many of us use, and they're typically free to download, and they're used by members of the general public, activists, journalists, politicians, the guy at the corner store. Like, it doesn't fucking matter. It's anybody, right? It's a general access tool, including WhatsApp, which is now the world's biggest end-to-end encrypted platform, even though, of course, being owned by Meta, it's going to have its own issues, all that sort of thing. But generally speaking, they're all pretty okay, and they all kind of work, right? And they're all free to access. underneath those, in basically what I see as a shadow industry, there is like the tech arm of organized crime, and that involves companies such as Phantom Secure, EncroChat, you mentioned, Sky, the one here, Number One BC, which is one used by the Italian mafia, Xclue, which is another one in the Netherlands. Like, in the same way I could list a crazy array of free apps anybody can download, I could list like a similarly sized number of companies that are in this space as well. And what makes them different is that they're not free to download. They cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for like a 6-month subscription. Sometimes you can only get hold of the phones, which are just Android phones, which are modified, or sometimes iPhones, which have the software installed. You can sometimes only get those if you know a reseller IRL. Like, you have to physically go meet them. Sometimes you can buy them online, but sometimes you have to go into a physical spy shop, which is very popular in Amsterdam, where you buy like GPS trackers and buggers and all that, and your encrypted phone, or a reseller. And I can't stress enough, like, this is a massive industry, and I think this is what people don't pay that much attention to, is that these companies bring in tens of millions of dollars. Like, in some ways they are as valuable as like a Silicon Valley startup when it's just getting going, and they release new features, they release updates, everybody's very loyal to their particular encrypted phone brand. And I guess just the last thing, which I think is really important for people to understand, is that they typically, at least now, they used to a long time ago, but now they don't communicate with one another. Like, you can't take a Sky phone like these guys were using and use that to talk to somebody on EncroChat. Like, they're not compatible. And that's partly a security thing, but it's also a business thing, in that if I'm selling Sky phones and I sell it to one drug trafficker, I want him to buy more Sky phones. So I'm not going to allow it to be like cross-pollinate with other networks. So you have these like cells almost, or these little closed networks, which can grow to a massive, massive size. I mean, Sky at one point had 70,000 users, I think. EncroChat, I think 30, something like that. Phantom Secure had 10,000 at one point. And generally speaking, with some notable exceptions like defense lawyers who I've spoken to, generally speaking, a massive percentage of those users are serious organized criminals.
Right, but to make them, it's legal, right?
Yes, and that is where law enforcement gets annoyed, because it is not illegal to make an encrypted phone. It's not illegal to use an encrypted phone, right? And this was a problem especially for Phantom Secure, which was a Canadian company that the FBI eventually shut down. The issue was that the phones were massive among the bikers in Australia, especially the Comancheros, which is very similar to the Hells Angels, also does drug trafficking, also does a lot of violence. And you can't just go and, hey, stop using that phone. like, it's completely legal. Like, go away. And then same with Canada as well. So at least in the Phantom Secure case, they brought in the FBI because they have something called RICO, which is Racketeering, Influence, Corrupt Organizations Act. I hope I got that right. But basically, that was the law for mob bosses, where the guy at the top doesn't get his hands dirty, but this law allowed them to prosecute them, and they started applying that to these encrypted phone companies. Yeah, but you can see how messy and ethically and legally fraught it gets when, yes, as you say, it is not illegal generally to have, use, or make one of these phones, and that's why prosecutors focus on, well, in this case, the phones were used to organize a hit on US soil by an Iranian drug trafficker, which is definitely illegal.
Yeah. The kind of people, I'm just so fascinated by this, the kind of people that are making these technologies, they're not necessarily like organized criminals, right? They're kind of like tech people that don't give a shit.
Yeah, it's really interesting because there's a whole spectrum of it. With Vincent Ramos, who was the creator of Phantom Secure, he started as just like a legit businessman who had an idea of like, well, privacy is like cool and a good brand thing, like VIP status. This was when Blackberries were big, and it started on that. Obama had his Blackberry. Do you want a Phantom Secure Blackberry? He started legit, and then when stuff got bad, he leaned into that criminal customer base, because that's the only way he was going to make money. And then on the flip side, you have companies like NPC, one which I haven't mentioned until now, but that was created by two Scottish cocaine drug kingpins who first made it for their own operations and then realized there's a business opportunity here selling this to other criminal gangs. And that was made by and for organized crime. So there is a spectrum there. But the end result is that, yeah, there's a shit ton of criminals on these things.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So let's just go back to the case we're talking about. So this Iranian criminal, he's known as Big Guy, I think it was, or like The Guy, or something like that, from when I was reading the article. Who was this guy? Like, how was he connected to the Iranian regime?
Yeah, so this was a little tricky in that, look, I honestly had not heard of this guy when I first read the document, but when I got sent the DOJ indictments and I went through it and I just quickly looked around, it quickly became apparent, oh, okay, this guy is a really, really big deal. There's some reports out of like English language outlets that focus on Iran talking about him, but the most important thing probably, and it made my verification a little bit easier rather than relying on some other media reports, was that the US Department of Treasury came out and they said that Zindashti, quote, operates at the behest of Iran's Ministry of Intelligence and Security. I mean, their intelligence agency, right? Now, what the exact contours of that relationship is, I'm not exactly sure. I mean, maybe your listeners have a better idea on that. But I would say that if you're a top tier drug trafficker in Iran, I think the Iranian government's probably going to know about it. And they're either going to let you do that under their conditions, or they're not going to let you do it.
Popular Front is entirely grassroots and independent. Subscribe to our Patreon for hundreds of exclusive bonus episodes, extra video content, access to the Popular Front network, and more. Keeps us moving forward, keeps us independent. Patreon.com/popularfront. If you like Popular Front, you probably don't like surveillance and internet censorship, so we've teamed up with Proton VPN, who are sponsoring this episode. They're offering our listeners a deal on their services that will help you swerve the internet gatekeepers and various firewalls. Go to protonvpn.com/popularfront to save money on internet privacy services with Proton VPN. So there was some kind of deal made to say, like, right, if you're going to do this, you have to help us in the West.
There's some sort of relationship, which is why I say, which I think is like even beyond the encrypted phone stuff, which is obviously my focus. As you sort of said at the top when you laid out how crazy this story was, and one of my editors, Emmanuel, was like definitely stressing this as well. It's just that it's crazy that there is this link between the Iranian state and this drug trafficker. It would be crazy for that to exist for any state, you know what I mean? In sort of the same way that there's the North Korean regime, and you know, they dabble in drug trafficking to fund their own mission, right? I'm not saying the money from this guy goes straight to the Iranian state, but there's a similar mutually beneficial arrangement, it seems, there, to the point where this guy is trying to orchestrate hits in Maryland.
And how was it that they found out about this? How was this essentially not an assassination and a court case?
So that's where things get a little bit muddy, but we do have a kind of good idea, and it will lead me on to some of the operations that have happened around these companies. So what I would say is that, first of all, I reached out to the US authorities and I said, well, how did you get these Sky messages? Like, they're supposed to be end-to-end encrypted. And then I pointed to, I gave them my theory, which I'll explain in a minute, and they declined to comment. That theory, which is the most likely explanation at this point until more information comes out, is that European authorities, back in around 2020, they actually hacked into Sky, and they got something like 500 million, with a B, messages, like a tsunami of intelligence, right? They didn't arrest many people at the time, but ever since that sort of incident, and especially the following year in 2021, there's been a constant drip of arrests related to Sky messages. And I think I literally got a Google alert today saying, oh yes, we've just cracked down on somebody else who was using Sky. So there is this massive bank of messages sitting around. It's been predominantly used by European agencies, especially the Belgians, the Dutch, I think the French, not really the UK for Sky, from what I remember, but they did some EncroChat stuff. And my theory is that those messages are now making their way to US authorities, essentially. And beyond that being like basically the Occam's razor explanation, there is one other case I've seen where US authorities did get the Sky messages from European authorities, where they charged an Albanian gangster who was working with a US-based telecommunications CEO to build a submarine drone to smuggle drugs, which is another entirely crazy story in its own right. But I bring it up just to show that US authorities have got access to Sky messages before, so my hunch is that this is how they did this as well. The only other explanation would be like there was some sort of informant sweeping up these conversations, but considering it doesn't read like it's in a group chat, that seems unlikely. So I think it's probably derived from the Sky hack. And just to be clear, Sky no longer exists in its past form, because after that hack from the European authorities, a few days later, the US DOJ indicted Sky's CEO, and he's a Canadian, sat in Canada, still free right now, getting like, because what you brought up earlier of, well, it's not actually illegal to make these phones, and it's not illegal to make them in Canada. Trying to get an extradition of a Canadian citizen in Canada for something that's not a crime in Canada is actually really, really difficult for the FBI.
Yeah, I guess it all ties into this. Well, what did he actually do? He gave people an opportunity, right? But that doesn't mean that he made it just for them, I guess. I mean, he probably did, but you know what I mean? It's a tricky one, I guess. In terms of the people that were meant to be hit, the ones that were meant to be killed, why them? What was so specific about them? Plenty of people flee Iran, or not plenty, but you know what I mean? There's enough. I have a friend who fled Iran. They've not tried to kill her yet, as far as I'm aware. Like, why was it these two people that such a huge... well, maybe not huge, but such a complicated plan was set out, including so many people, cross countries, criminal network, drug dealers. Why were these two people, targeted to be killed?
I mean, that is ultimately, I think, the final question which needs to be answered around this entire case. I mean, as I mentioned, I'm looking at the New York Times coverage now, and their headline is, US charges Iranian man and 2 Canadians in plot to kill refugees. Refugees is not the word used in the court records. I presume the New York Times has some sort of reason for using that term, right? And I'm going to go through more coverage from other outlets just to see if I can piece like a little bit more together. But yes, the court record says defector, basically, something along those lines. It doesn't use the word refugees, but just to speculate a little bit, and I think in a fair way, as you say, very fortunately, not every Iranian person leaving the country for whatever reason is going to get targeted like this, thank God. But to cross that threshold, they have to presumably offer some sort of value to the Iranian state, in that it'd be better for the Iranian state if these people were unfortunately dead. And what the exact reason is, I don't know. But this is a lot to ask. As we said, 350K, that's expensive. Getting an Iranian drug trafficker on the state's, not payroll necessarily, but a relationship there, that's a tall ask as well. I want to know why these people were targeted. Obviously, hopefully without them being exposed further, but there must be some sort of concrete reason, I would say, beyond them leaving the country.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, going back to the New York Times, I mean, judging on their current track record regarding, problems they've had reporting on Gaza, I don't think there could be any reason that they would use refugees. I think maybe someone just went, yeah, just say refugee. I don't think it was double checked, because that's just me speculating. But the fact that it says defector in the court record suggests to me that it's something to do with the state. You don't leave a country by defecting. You leave, right? If you defect from a power structure of some sort, which you would probably be involved in at a political level. That's my guess anyway, just the fact that they've used that language. You know what I mean?
Yeah. As you say, like, you don't defect from a country just by leaving it. You defect from a government. You defect from a party. You do some sort of act of leaving or separating from a position of power, a party of power. You don't just get a visa and fuck off.
Right, exactly. And it really, to me, this it's similar to other kind of cases that have happened involving Iran and various kind of despotic countries. They always have an arm in a different country. Even militant groups, you know, like a lot of drug dealers in London will be, you know, sending a bit of money back to various militant groups. It's a fascinating situation. And I think with the dawn of like Encro and all of those other kind of things being bust open, we're seeing a lot more the inside of this stuff. Something that you've been covering a lot, not specifically this, but that kind of situation at 404 Media. And I wanted to talk about this because obviously Popular Front, we're independent, have been from day one, and it's not a great time for the media at all. So tell us, what is 404? You're a co-founder. Why did you decide to kind of start this in what is quite a turbulent time? And I guess as well, like, explain what it actually is for any of our listeners that don't know.
Yeah, sure. So first off, 404 Media is an independent investigations focused website, and we cover mostly technology, and that will include everything from AI that my co-founders Sam Cole and Manuel Mayberg do, to me doing more cybersecurity, privacy, crime, this sort of stuff. And then Jason Kebler, the final co-founder, does a lot of, you know, Google News, more AI, the failures of social media platforms, all of that sort of stuff. So, you know, I encourage people to go check it out. I'm sure you'll find at least one article that interests you in some sort of way. As for how we got there, I'll keep it brief, but like, you and I were actually both at Vice. Like, we never, I don't think we ever like met in person. I think our paths like sort of crossed, like a little bit of a Venn diagram, but obviously you intimately understand the problems that company had. I was there for a little bit longer because I was on the tech side, where we were fortunately like not completely fucked over, unlike the rest of the company, but it eventually came for us as well, basically. And the catalyzing moment was that when Vice was going bankrupt, I was playing Battlefield 2042 with Emmanuel on my PlayStation, and he says, yes, and he says, have you seen this PDF which just came out from the bankruptcy court case, and it says all of our executive salaries? I'm like, no, what are you talking about? I go and read it, and it shows that while they were laying off dozens, if not, I think 150 journalists, the executives were making $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 a year, as well as six-figure bonuses, I think in the 150K range. I can't remember what the exact bonus was, but that made me fucking pissed, obviously. I tweet the bankruptcy document being like, this is so much worse than I thought at this company. That got picked up by the Daily Mail, the New York Post. I'm surprised I wasn't fired, but I think they knew that if they did that, it would look really bad.
Yeah, even worse, yeah.
Yes, even worse for Vice, which is crazy. But to then just bring it to 404, that was basically the moment where I'm like, this is enough. This is not sustainable. These media companies are firing people constantly. The people who go into conflict zones like yourself, or war zones from like other colleagues at Vice, and I'm fucking sick of it. So we decided to launch our own subscriber focused outlet, just like Popular Front does. You know, we don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket, simply because everything is so volatile right now. It's like, hey, if there's another downturn or something, maybe people can't subscribe. That would suck for us. It would suck for everybody. So let's do a little bit of advertising as well. Let's do a little bit of documentary work as well. But the vast majority of the income comes from people paying us $10 a month to get bonus podcast content and articles and access to our archives. It's a very straightforward business. You pay journalists money and we will do the journalism. That's it.
No, absolutely. And like, full disclosure, I'm a signed up member of it. Like, I saw it, I was like, this is fucking dope. To me, it was like Wired but way gnarlier. Do you know what I mean? Which I love Wired still. I think Wired does some great shit still. It was just like a very specific kind of edge of Wired that to me felt I don't want to say like Wired is good, but like to me what 404 is like, right, everyone here really knows their shit. You know what I mean? And I really enjoy it, and I think it's a great way to do things. I think it's the way forward as well. And for all the faults of Vice and the way it went, it was a great training ground kind of for a lot of us, you know. Even to this day, you know, there's I contacted an old friend from Vice the other day, an editor, and was like, hey, I've got this new project. I think you'd be great editing it. And she was like, yeah, let's do it. So, you know, when it was a great place for that. But now we're seeing this sort of thing. Popular Front has kind of come out of that. 404 has kind of come out of that. And I really hope there's more. But yeah, no, I think 404 is great. Have you got plans in the future? Like you said a little bit about documentary work and stuff like that. I think people really love the kind of multimedia side of things now.
Yeah, so we do have a couple of projects in the works. One is a podcast which is in active production. I don't think I can talk about that. It's being handled by somebody else, but yes, there's that. And then there's also documentary interest in one of our other articles. And, you know, if that goes ahead, I'll be working on that. It's hard to get that stuff going, as you know, when you've like literally just started, because there's so much business administration to do. I don't want to bore everybody about that, but like we're business owners now and you have to do that as well. But the journalism will always come first, and we're trying to streamline the business side. Again, you give us money, we'll make the journalism, so we can do more stuff like that. And eventually, definitely not yet, we're nowhere near this, but we would like to grow sustainably. You know, we're never going to take VC funding, at least as far as I know. I mean, that's a conviction of mine for sure. And we never had a outside funding. We all put like £1,000 of our own cash in, you know, so just to get it going. But it's just that we'll keep on going, and eventually maybe we'll grow sustainably. You know, maybe hire some more people, get some more stories out, but not make the same mistake of these media companies, which are like a growth at all cost mentality, almost like the tech giants. You know, it's like that doesn't scale. We're humans, and we want to write journalism for humans as well, and that takes time.
No, it does, absolutely. And it's really important, I think, especially in this kind of window that we're all in this like independent media is actually kind of coming back in a big way. The legacy media is dying out in some ways, and everyone's learned, or should have learned, that taking money from big VC investment funds is going to absolutely destroy you in the long run. Like Vice, basically, it was very simple what they could have done to thrive forever into eternity, and they just got greedy, and they instead of, like you said, get the money, make the journalism, it became like, no, I want to get the money and get the mansion and get that. Like, people need to realize ain't no one ever going to get rich from journalism. But if you can make a living off of it and keep going, that's really important. So I hope things really do work out for you guys. Where can people find out what you do if they want to, you know, they want to sign up, they want to get involved? And I will say as well, there's a lot coming out. Like every day I've got something in my email and I'm like, okay, cool. Like there's another thing I've got to listen to, another thing I've got to read by these. So it's not one of these new things where it's like, yeah, we're going to start up and vanish. Like there's a lot going on there that I've noticed.
Yeah, every single day, and I appreciate that. The website itself is 404media.co. We can't afford a .com.
Same. Popular Front .co, same.
Yeah, it was like 20,000 or something insane. So there's that. So obviously just go to the main website if you want to read the articles. But I would also say that come check out our podcast as well on all the normal platforms. That's just the 404 Media Podcast. I'm the host, and then every week we'll talk about, you know, 2 stories that we published in the past 7 days, and then a subscribers only section at the end where we get a bit more loose and talk about another story, and we just bitch about Google and them getting mad at us, basically. But they're the 2 main things, and more to come. So if you go to the website, you sign up with your email, you won't miss what we have coming. We try to deliver high quality stuff basically every single day.
Yeah, definitely. And what I like as well, it's kind of disruptive as well. It's not another one of these fucking like AstroTurf news companies for the kids. It's like, nah, this is like proper and it's actually disruptive, which I think is really good. If people want to just follow you and see what you're doing as well, you put a lot of good stuff out on Twitter and that, where can they do that?
Yeah, for me specifically, you can follow my Twitter. Unfortunately, that's just where my biggest audience remains, is Joseph F. Cox. I'm also on Mastodon, Blue Sky, Threads. I hate this so much. This is why we this is why we're doing the email, man. So I don't have to like do all these platforms. But yes, I'm on all the major ones. You'll see me under Joseph Cox. And then my email is joseph@404media.co if you want to ping me directly.
Yeah, it's better for people to sign up to the newsletter, right?
Yes, 100%, because we don't have to deal with the middlemen of these tech platforms that can just flip a switch, and you never know what's going to happen.
Absolutely. I mean, we do have a email newsletter, but I really need to get someone to properly go at that, because we noticed the same thing. Like my Twitter now, it doesn't reach anybody. You know what I mean? It's like 130,000 followers I've got, and it, you know, barely any interaction with anything. And to be honest, I use Twitter and social media like, you know, promo, PR mostly. Sometimes just to be an idiot and say something stupid or whatever, but mostly for like promo. And like that's like nerfed into the ground. I don't know why. And then Instagram, like we all of our platforms are like censored. They even let you know. They say, hi, we're not going to suggest any of your content to anybody that doesn't already follow you. Popular Front has nearly 500,000 followers on Instagram, and then if you look at the like I forget what it's called, like, you know, the numbers, we're hitting like 2,000 people if we're lucky. It's like clearly something is going on, you know. So yeah, email's the best way, definitely. Anyway, I'm not going to talk your ear off, but thanks very much for that, and I really think you're doing some good stuff, man. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me anytime at all.
Cheers, mate. That was the Popular Front podcast. If you want more exclusive bonus episodes, extra video content, access to the Popular Front network, ad-free episodes, and other Patreon-only shows that we do, subscribe to patreon.com/popularfront. We are entirely grassroots and independent. Nobody owns us. Patreon keeps us going, as does our merchandise. You can get Popular Front apparel and accessories at www.popularfront.shop. You can also buy our various publications there, like the Popular Front magazine, which comes out 4 times a year. We are censored on social media and streaming platforms, so please follow and share our content. Watch our documentaries at youtube.com/popularfront. Follow us on Instagram at popular.front. Twitter at popularfront_, and for uncensored updates on the world at war, follow our Telegram at popularxfront. If you want to keep track of my other projects, it's the same on all socials at Jake_Hanrahan. That's HANRAHAN. For all these links and more, go to www.popularfront.cc. The music in this episode was produced by Sam Black. Check him out at samblackpf.com or search Sam Black PF on Spotify. The intro music is by Home. If you want to advertise with us and you're not literally evil, email jake@hanrahan.tv. Thank you to the Patreons on the credit tier. They are Lucky Psycho, Onofrio Modogno, Pengu, Jessica, Peter Cherry, Lupe Calderon Garnica, Thomas Giuseppe, Viola Forvel, Christian Bustamante, Daniel Verdin, Margosha, Rohan, Ryan Barbadillo, VS, Brian R, Evan Pank, Bradley Hope, Wizard Actual, Benjamin Topper, Siddhartha O, Damien, Cameron Collins, Scott Turnbull, Matthew Diffley, Liana, Robert, Sean, Cuisinart 8, Cuisinart, Christianovich, NTHG, Ethan Zvik, Peter Nybraten, Gabriel K, David McManus, Tom Petrie, James Leons, Bradley Davies, No Dogs No Hamsters, Brendan Crave, B, Dallas Dunn, LD50 Seattle, Adam H, B Rambo, Larson 8669, Evan Julien, Diamondstein, Michael O'Connor, Nicholas Butter, JD, James Karpinski, Jav, James Cully, Ethan, Fitzmadrid, Ed Coulthard, D San, Mike Barone, Scott Hopton, Liam Williams, Propaganda, DZA, Giorgio Arani, Vegan Straight Edge, Amy, Rubicon, Frank Austin, Caitlin Wicks, Michael, Neck, Freya Northman, Andrew Hurley, Brian McLaughlin, Tom Lochrin, Young Wasabi, Tony Bin, Adam Bergsnyder, JL, Stephen Davila, Chad Walker, Peter McCormack from What Bitcoin Did, Christopher Martin, Ryan Sandercock, and Moritz Zumbul. Thank you all so much. Support Popular Front, patreon.com/popularfront.